that introduction reminds me a little bit of a story about one of the extension professionals that I worked with in Iowa. And Iowa was he was a community development guy, and he was talking about reappraisal and classification of agricultural land. And he was going to do it at a big Catholic church hall in western Iowa. And so he's figuring when he goes there, well, there's going to be maybe 10 people there, right? So he drives up there, and it's full of cars and pickups. And he says, they must really be interested in knowing what I'm going to talk about. I'm really pumped about this. So he said, I get up there, and they introduce me, and I'm starting talking, going to my slide presentation about reappraisal classification. And pretty soon a guy stands up at the back of the room and says, hey, who are you? He says, I'm Wayne Cobberdahl with Iowa State University. When are we going to talk about the bingo rules? He said, well, I'm not talking about the bingo rules. I'm just going to talk about, well, where's the guy that's going to talk about the bingo rules? He said, okay, well, I'll be real short with my presentation and we'll get on to the bingo rules. That's why everybody was at the meeting, was to hear the bingo rules, not to hear him talk about reappraisal and classification. But anyway, do I have a remote for this, or oh, there it is. Now, the key is I can figure it out. I'll assume this is the way that goes. Yeah. So anyway, really what I'm talking about, and it will include a little bit of genetics, but talking about how do you improve the value of your calf crop? Because I have never met a rancher who has told me that they want less money for their calves. I have heard ranchers say, my calves didn't bring as much as I thought they should. I've had a lot of ranchers tell me my calves top the market every year. Somewhere in between there's a disconnect. Okay, there's a little bit of a disconnect. But there's a lot of different things that play into the value. A year ago in the fall, going to the Manhattan sale barn, the nicest set of black Angus steers I've ever seen, fresh off the ranch, came through the ring and brought $1.32 a pound. If he'd have sold them a week later, they'd have brought $1.50. I mean, it was just a bad week. So you can't predict those kinds of things. But the one thing I admire about you people is, for all the hard work that you do, but the other thing is you lay a lot of it on the line 1 week out of the year, maybe 2. So you want to maximize the complete value of what you've invested in your genetics, right? So what really determines that value? You would say what? What really determines the value when you go to the sale barn or to the Superior Livestock auction? What determines the value of your calves? It's the demand by whoever happens to be there that day, right? Where do your calves come from? Who buys them? And why should they buy them? Why do they want to buy your calves? And I'm here to tell you, and should I care, because I have had several people tell me most ranchers do not retain ownership through the feedlot and finishing phase. Most people sell at weaning, after weaning, maybe after a backgrounding period. Should I care what happens later on? And I would argue you really, really should. Somebody will say to me, why do I care about a bull that has high marbling? I don't feed the cattle. No, but somebody else is going to. And marbling drives, let's face it, folks, quality grade drives the beef market. And I think the first thing that you should think about when you're selecting genetics or any program or marketing through any avenue is to remember who is going to consume the product. My good friend Dave Nichols, who's on the AAA board, American Angus Association, made the statement. I got permission from him to steal it. He said, every dollar that is generated in the beef industry comes out of the pocketbook of a consumer. Because if it doesn't, then we might as well be raising them for a zoo, right? My cows look nice, but one day that cow who's 12 or 14 years old is going to be meat for somebody else. And the value that she has is going to be determined by the packer buyers that's sending them up the road here to Gibbon, Nebraska, or wherever. Same deal goes for the calf. The problem that we've got really is we still have a lot of disconnect in the beef industry. We're still too segmented, despite the fact that everybody says we want to cooperate, we want to move the industry forward. We're getting better, but there's a lot of disconnect in our industry. So how do you market your calf crop? You go to the local sale barn. Some people do private treaty, video auction. My good friends are here from Superior, or retain ownership all the way through. Now, we tend to be creatures of habit. So we tend to market the same way every year. It's just like the guy who sits down at lunch at work and opens his lunch pail, and he looks at his meal and he's got his sandwich and he says, "Oh, gosh, peanut butter and jelly again." And his coworker says, "Why don't you ask your wife to make you something different?" He says, "I pack my own lunch." So, part of it is we're a victim of our own, of what our own issues are, whatever they might be. So, in order to get the most and maximize the value of your cattle, you need to tell or sell your story. The breed of bulls that you use, bull or bulls, the breed of the females, and we're going to get into more depth on that. It's not that simple. Weaned and time weaned. Are they weaned? Vaccination protocols. Value-added qualifications. If you go to a feedlot, the more progressive feedlots, and they will tell you this, I work with one in western Nebraska, and they are now taking tissue samples from animals that die from AIP, congestive failure, and lung problems, and heart problems. And they're determining through genetic markers for that predispose animals for that disease. So that someday down the road, it's not going to happen tomorrow and it's not going to happen in 2019, but we're going to be able to determine what those cattle will be like in the feedlot in terms of their health program, how we're going to treat them, how we're going to vaccinate them and things like that, or whether we're even going to buy them or not. But the one that's probably the kicker right now is third-party verification for NHTC, natural, or any of these other programs. That will drive value. That will drive value. The diet that they're on before they're sold, the condition they're in, and we're going to talk about that. And so what I'm trying to say to you is you need to figure out what your program is, what your end market is, even if you're selling weaned calves. Know where they're going to go, know your buyers, know what they want. And if the current marketing scheme you're using is not helping you to maximize that value, then you need to find another venue. And they're out there. The thing we don't do well enough as ranchers, I'm not a rancher, you are, but the thing that we probably as an industry don't do well enough is telling other people about all the good stuff, right? So sometimes you take them to sale barn and you give them a whole list of all the shots you gave them, and then the auctioneer will say, "Well, they had all their shots." Well, what does that mean? Does that mean one blackleg shot? Does that mean one viral for bovine respiratory syncytial virus? Whatever. So you need to know what they are. Have they been implanted? Have they not been implanted? And make sure that they repeat them. And if they're not going to, then find another place that will. Because there's buyers out in the stands that will listen to that and pay attention to it. So it's easy for me to say all these things, right? I'm not up here making my living doing this, but we've got to think about what's in demand down the road from the consumer, and the millennial is definitely a big influencer in what millennials like to eat meat. They do. Most of them like to eat meat, so keep that in mind. But there's going to be increased demand for information by those people. They want to know where it come from. They want to know if you scratched its back every day. You want to know if it had shelter from the wind. They want to know a lot of times how the animals are handling, and they have these third-party verification for animal handling that you can get. All kinds of certification programs are out there that you really need to pay attention to and be thinking about. But again, I go back and I put this picture, up here, is knowing what's at the other end. Where are they going to fit in that value chain? If you're going to sell cattle on the live market and sell them for $1.19 a pound or whatever the market is that week as fat cattle, that's one thing. But if you're going to sell them on a quality-based grid and get 30, 50, 80, 100, in the case of natural programs up to $250 over the base price, then you need to be thinking about that. This is my daughter with a steer she had last year. We raised him out of a crossbred cow and a show sire, right? Okay, so we got the carcass data. What do you think he graded? You're smiling back there. What do you think he graded? He graded prime, choice, upper two-thirds choice, select, or standard? No. He graded select. And that week they sold, they were $7 or $8 a hundredweight back. He had an 800-pound carcass, so you're 55, 60 bucks off what he really should have been. Now, there's a market for select beef. I mean, somebody's going to eat it. It's going to go somewhere. But he was a great steer and had a really big ribeye, but he had basically no marbling, and his value really wasn't much, especially for the time that she spent trying to get him ready for fair. But what makes him worth that added value? It's what's under the hide. Now, they have to perform too, and we'll look at some of that in a bit as well, but that's the key to adding value. Now, I'm going to share with you some data from the Superior Livestock auction video, and this will be the first time, Andy, that anybody's seen this in a public presentation. I saved it just for you. So I appreciate, what's that? I know that about you. Oh, Andy. So anyway, of the 23 sales that were held in 2017, 7,358 lots, and the average size of a lot was 84 head. So that was on over 600,000 head that sold through Superior. And the average weight was 574 pounds plus or minus 85. The average price per hundredweight was $156.70, and that was based on a base of 60% steers, 40% heifers. So that's what you're looking at. Now, when you look at breed type, and we're just talking about English versus exotic here in this particular case. But if you'll look at that, the English cross, this is Angus, Red Angus, Hereford, the English breeds. Why do you think they brought more money? Higher quality beef, okay? You're going to have more, these breeds have more inherent natural disposition to marble. That is why the buyers buy them, okay? The English Continental Cross, also very popular. You're going to get a little bigger ribeye. You're probably going to get a little bit higher average daily gain on those cattle. They brought just a little bit less at 139.30, and the Brahman Influence were the base at 137.07. The story is always, people will say to me when I talk about quality, they'll say, but pounds pays the bills. That's right. But quality pounds really pays the bills. And the Little Robe Angus Ranch, the Jenkins are good friends of mine. Hi, guys and gals. They raise some high-quality bulls, sell some high-quality bulls. And those animals that come out of there, if you look at the marked data, the Angus breed has risen, you know, on their yearling weight EPDs, they're as big as a Simmental. So a lot of the English breeds are weighing as much. The Red Angus is nearly there as well. So you need to be thinking about that in terms of what, now I realize you got different environmental conditions. If you're down on the coast, it's different than being in the Panhandle. There's obviously some things that are going on there that you have to pay attention to. But I'm just reporting to you the facts. Now, if you break that down by all the breed sires that you had enough numbers on to differentiate, and this particular slide is actually 8 years worth of data, and it's broken down by steers and heifers. The highest priced steers were Charolais sired steers out of whatever kind of cows at 177.17, and then Angus and Red Angus were basically tied statistically. The Red Angus steers brought 175.60, the Black Angus 175.14, so they brought the same money. But when you talk about this, these are load lots. When you sell on Superior, it's got to be a load lot. And so it makes a huge difference in the total amount on your check at the end of the day. I need to point out that the gentleman that did the study is actually at Kansas State University. Mike King is the guy who runs all the analysis. He's brilliant. He's a good friend of mine. He would melt in front of a crowd, but he can analyze anything, and he's fantastically smart. And then Ken Odie is our department chair, who's also an animal scientist and is a rancher himself in South Dakota. But those are the guys that crunch the numbers. So this is not numbers that's developed by us. It's developed by Superior or through Ken and Mike. So then when you look at the price of heifers, again, we've got differences. That the Red Angus heifers brought more money than any of the other breed types at 171.5. And if you go back to the previous slide, if I can do that, they'll almost dollar up with the steers a lot of time because there's been a demand for Red Angus and the females in the marketplace. And then the Black Angus sired heifers and the Charolais sired heifers tied at second with about 166 per hundredweight. So there's definitely some difference in breed types and what you're going to sell. Now, the third-party verification deal, NHTC, is non-hormone treated cattle. Okay, these cattle can actually be given antibiotics or fed antibiotics, ionophores, or given antibiotics. So this is be for the European market. So they've never been given an implant, and they've never been fed a beta agonist like Optiflex. That has to be third-party verified through someone like IMI Global or Samson. There's some of those folks. But the value in that is $284 per hundredweight for calves that are NHTC qualified. Now that may not seem like a bunch. $3 times 6, $18-20. If you looked at the feeder cattle through the Superior, it turns out to be $60. So the older they get and the bigger they get, the further down the road that premium increases quite a bit. But there's value added in that program. And by the way, there's programs called Never Ever, which are no hormones, no antibiotics, and a lot of those you've been able to just sign affidavits that, yeah, we didn't implant these calves, no, they never received an antibiotic, and that was all you had to do. Tyson, starting July 1 of this year, is going to require that even Never Ever programs, before you just sign an affidavit for, now you have to get third-party verified through someone else. That comes at an added cost. So you have to weigh that out. But if you get enough paid for these, and the fat cattle market right now is paying anywhere from $225 to $275 a head for a finished steer or heifer if they're NHTC or natural. Now, age and source alone by itself used to be really big when we had the Japanese market and they wouldn't take anything, over 21 months of age. So that has dropped back from, packers used to pay $35 to $60 a head for cattle that had age and source. That's kind of gone away. But again, the Superior data would say that there's a $125 a hundredweight in age and source. And this can be done, it's third party, but a little plug for our tagging program, which I'll talk more about later. It's only 99 cents a tag. And there's no enrollment fee and no audit fee. So you get about an $8 return on a 99-cent investment for those tags. So I would take a real hard look. And the reason why is the source part. Again, people want to know where the cattle came from. They want a sense of traceability. If we look at our tag program, it's called the Yellow Tag Feeder Calf Certification Program Tag. It's age and source and genetically verified that those calves are at least 50% Red Angus genetics. And that's the same 99-cent tag I just talked about with no enrollment fee. So for $284 or for 99-cent head investment, you're getting about a $16.5 to $17 return. All for answering a few questions and in getting the tag shipped to you and putting them in. They do have to be put in the animal's ear before they leave your ranch. It's a USDA process verified program tag, but that is real dollars. That is a real return on your investment. Anytime you can use one of those. There's not programs out there that are as cheap as this one is. And because of that, program and the value that it's provided, we've seen a huge growth in those tag number sales. We went from the blue bar represents the feeder calf, which is genetic, age, and source. The red bar is just age and source. It's called Allied Access. If you have straight Brahman cattle, if you have Holstein cattle, whatever kind, you can buy our Allied Access tag for 99 cents, and it's age and source. So you'll get some value out of that. But our program has grown now. Last 2 years, we've been up 39%, and we sold over 185,000 tags, and they started that program in 1994. It's the oldest and the largest age, source, and genetically verified program tag in the industry. Then we also looked at regions. So you're a victim of where you are, right? You're not going to move your ranch from the Texas Panhandle to western Nebraska, unless, of course, you want to see more snow and rain. But there is a difference in the price regionally with the north central Rocky Mountain states. You look at the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, the calves that come out of there tend to be the highest priced ones, but the south central is the second highest. That'd be Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma. So we've got a pretty good market here. We have proximity to the feed yards, and that's what helps us out there. The folks from the southeast, a lot of times they got, the southeastern cattle have had a bad reputation for too long of a time. The cattle really aren't that bad. It's just it takes a long time to get them to a feedlot out here where they can be fed because they don't have as much corn. They're starting to change that. They've got some feedlots in Florida and Georgia now, and they got a plant there, and they're starting to harvest some of those cattle there, so maybe some of that will disappear. Flesh score. You're going to take your cattle to the sale barn. You all know it. You get them too fat, you're going to take a discount. Okay? So you can be, there's a margin of error there. The cattle that were judged to be medium to heavy condition, medium heavy to heavy condition, got a discount, $3 to $4.50 a hundredweight. So 18 to 20 bucks. So it really doesn't make any sense to add a whole lot of extra pounds before you take them in, because everybody likes the green cattle when they go to the sale barn. They want all the compensatory gain that they can get out of them. So a little bit about the health protocols through the same Superior Livestock auction database. I want to explain this before I start showing you some of the price differences. They've got several different programs, all developed by them. This is regardless of the product, whether you're using Merck or Zoetis or BI or whoever for your vaccines. But the VAC24 program means that those cattle were vaccinated one time while nursing at 2 to 4 months of age, so at branding time, if you will, and a 7-way clostridial. And then plus the viral, so one shot. The VAC34 is they were vaccinated 2 times with the clostridial and 1 time for the virals prior to shipping, and then Mannheimia and Pasturella. If you look at VAC34 plus, they get 2 shots of each and then 1 shot of the Mannheimia and Pasturella. VAC45 is the kicker. VAC45 includes, and that'll be key to these next slides, VAC45 includes a 45-day weaning period. 45 days. 2-3 weeks does not do it. I've talked to numerous feed yards, and they would all tell me, I would rather take the calves right off the cow than if you took them off the cow and kept them at home for 14 to 21 days and then shipped them, because it is a wreck. They don't have enough time to build up immunity. They're still not used to being away from mama. So fence line weaning, if you can incorporate that, and for a 45-day period, is huge in the value. We'll see in just a minute. VAC34 has a plus program, which is the 2 times. VAC45 plus has got 3 times of both the viral and clostridial shots, plus parasite control required. The other programs do not require a dewormer, any of the others. And then they have to be weaned to 45 days. So if you look at this, and this is the way I like to sort it out just to simplify it, but if you look at what the value difference is, VAC45 VAC 45 pre-con you can rule out because that's for cattle that are feeder cattle. They've been weaned a long time anyway. So you can probably disregard VAC pre-con in the instance that I've got here. And then the cattle that are weaned 45 days and maybe only received one viral shot and didn't go through any of these health protocols, if you will look at the difference between VAC 24, which is the one time, or even the VAC 34, which may be 2 shots, but no weaning, you're looking at a difference of what? I can't do the math. $6 a hundredweight, so that's $40 a head. $35 to $40 a head is the added value of that. Now, if you're going to do that, you're obviously got to feed those calves a little something, but you want to keep them green and light, so there's going to be a cost associated with that, which is not included in this example, but you can make that work. You can make that work with some cheap feedstuffs. Maybe you don't have cheap feedstuffs in the Panhandle. Do you have cheap feedstuffs in the Panhandle? You do. Okay. Well, that's good. Sometimes. Okay. So if you look then, and we just had them sort out because we've given Kansas State University some extra money to do some other analyses for us, Andy. So if you look at our red Angus cattle, they would be very similar to that. The cattle that were VAC 34 with no weaning compared to the VAC 45, we saw, $6.40 per hundredweight premium for those calves that are weaned versus those that are not weaned. I'm involved with the Tri-County Steer Carcass Futurity. I'm on that feedlot board, and we feed a number of retained ownership calves in this program. This data is a little bit older, but it goes from 2003 through 2012, and this would be similar to what, the old Texas Ranch to Rail, and I think New Mexico's got a program like this. But the difference in profit per head from the highest to the lowest, this is the difference now, not the profit per head, but the difference between the lowest profit and the highest profit ranged from $231 to $460 a head. Okay, so all these cattle are fed and then they are sold on a high quality grid to Tyson, get slaughtered at Dakota City. They run all the economic analysis on that. But look at the difference in the lowest versus the highest. $200 a head. Now, Andy, when you go back and you talk about what we were talking about earlier, right? The high cost and the low cost, but this is the revenue end. And I'm telling you the difference in these is tied to 2 things. It's tied to performance at the feedlot, and it's tied to carcass data. So if you look at, and we go back to our health deals we were talking about earlier, the cattle that were not treated in that first column, NT, the cattle that were treated once for a respiratory disease problem or were treated 2 or more times at the feedlot, look at the difference here in performance. Average daily gain, there's 1/4 pound a day difference in average daily gain. And these cattle are typically on feed for 150 to 200 days. You can do the math. Now, we have an estimated feed to gain. It's estimated because they don't feed them individually, obviously. They don't have a grow safe system at the feed yard. So that's just estimated on what they gain, and so it's probably not a real accurate figure, but the average daily gain is. So you're adding about 50 pounds at the end of the feeding period between the cattle that got sick and never got sick. And then when you look at all the additive values and discounts that come from the cattle that were treated not at all versus those that were treated once or twice, there's your difference we just talked about 2 slides ago, $365 difference between those cattle that were never treated versus those that were treated 2 or more times. They simply don't gain. They're not feeling well. They don't eat. Their carcasses are lighter. They do not marble as well because they're not eating as well. And they get a little bit of a yield grade premium because you'll have more yield grade 1s and 2s. They won't have as much fat cover on them. But the difference in average daily gain, in the treatment cost, in the discounts, you have more dark cutters, you have more cattle that do not perform It makes all the difference in the world. So going back again to my main point about what drives the value of your cattle, there it is in the feedlot and on the rail. But remember, that quality grade is huge. So we've got all kinds of value-added programs out there. We've got Top Dollar Angus, which Red Angus owns now, but Black and Red Angus cattle are eligible for that. We have a grid program through Tyson and through Greater Omaha for cattle that have our tag in it that pay extra premiums. We actually get an upper two-thirds choice premium on red-hided cattle if they carry that tag. CAB gets that, on upper two-thirds choice. They don't have to have any tag or any verification. They just have to have a black hide. The Red Angus cattle have to have the tag, so that's why it's value added. And then we got programs, Reputation Feeder Cattle, which I think the Angus Association has purchased and is working on that. IMI Global is a third-party verification. GAP 4, which is beef headed for Whole Foods. That's huge. That's really huge. It requires a lot of paperwork and a lot of extra time, but there's a lot of added money in that program. And if you go to these Superior Sales and you look through their catalogs, and I'll call them badges, but on every lot of cattle it'll have Angus Source, Red Angus, NHTC, GAP 4, whatever. The more badges they have, the more money they bring, because they can go a lot of different ways, and people know that you've cared enough to get these designations that they will pay more money for them. There's just no doubt about it. So I think the point is you've got to be thinking way ahead, thinking now about the calves that are dropping on the ground now. You can't change genetics, but you can make adjustments on all your other things to help improve the value of the cattle. So with that, I will wind up, Andy, and there's my cell phone number. You can call me anytime, almost anytime. We've got a team, a commercial marketing team. Kenny Stauffer just left us for Gene Seek. We're hiring a new person for Top Dollar Angus. But anyway, with that, Andy, thank you so much for having me.